Welcome to Taking Stock. I'm Amanda Lang. Coming up on the show, as major new projects are announced, what needs to happen next. Plus, finding new trading partners is a top goal for Canada, but that may be easier said than done. And are temporary foreign workers a problem or a solution? That's all ahead. First, for the week that was in business, it's time now for the briefs. The Prime Minister unveiled the first 5 major projects that will be undertaken in the country, including expansion of LNG capacity in BC, investment in modular nuclear reactors in Ontario, the Contrecoeur terminal in Quebec, and 2 copper mines, one in Saskatchewan and one in BC. The feds are promising to fast-track approvals and time to development. A major merger will see Canada's Teck Resources join forces with Britain's Anglo-American, with headquarters in British Columbia and a primary stock listing on the London Stock Exchange, creating a $70 billion entity that will be one of the world's leading producers of copper. The all-stock deal is being billed as a merger of equals, but gives Anglo shareholders 62% of the company. The deal still needs approval in Canada. The pace of home building continues to disappoint, especially in major urban centres like Toronto and Vancouver. Federal housing agency CMHC says overall housing starts were flat in the first half of the year versus 2024, but that some smaller cities like Calgary, Edmonton and Ottawa did report gains, just not enough to offset drops in bigger markets. Canada's MDA Space suffered a blow this week to the tune of $1.3 billion US dollars. That's the value of the contract it lost with EchoStar. MDA had been in line to help EchoStar deploy its own space-based network. EchoStar has sold the rights to its network spectrum to Elon Musk's SpaceX for about $17 billion US. Air Canada's flight attendants voted a resounding no to a deal their own union had tentatively reached with the airline. It included a 12% salary increase this year for junior flight attendants and an 8% bump for senior employees. 99.1% of union members rejected the deal, arguing that all in it would still put them below the federal minimum wage. The issue now goes to mediation and, if necessary, arbitration. Canadians purchased fewer electric vehicles in the second quarter, even as overall auto sales shot higher. Year-over-year registrations of electric vehicles fell 39.2% in the summer quarter, while hybrids declined 2.2%. That's despite a 5.9% increase in overall new vehicle registrations from a year prior. The week's sales come as the federal government reviews the overall EV mandate for new car sales. And those are your business briefs. Will the first major projects make a real difference in the trajectory of Canada's economy, and what needs to happen to make these work? Jay Kozla is Executive Director of Economic and Energy Policy at the Public Policy Forum. Jay, thanks for being with us.
Pleasure to be here, Amanda. Nice to see you.
So they're all right in your alley in terms of them being kind of energy-related, critical minerals. 5 to start, others to focus on. Did you like broadly what you heard? Is this the right track?
Look, in my mind, Amanda, this is a historic day for Canada. And yes, it's a good start. Like, all the steps are going in the right direction. But I would say, much more to come, and really to deliver on the agenda, there's a lot of rigor and discipline and focus that needs to be brought into this process. So yes, very important day for Canada, sort of almost economically growing up in a sense, moving our economic ties away from the U.S. to other markets, but a lot more to come. Yeah.
The first 5 projects they will themselves create jobs. Of course, they're mostly sort of related to the construction and expansion of a terminal in BC, mines in BC and Saskatchewan. But in terms of kind of the shift in that strategy, would you agree with me that the real meat on that is in the background, and some of it comes with these other kind of big projects that the Major Projects Office will undertake around a critical minerals gateway, around wind, offshore wind? I mean, and those are sort of longer and slower moving.
Terrific point. Yeah, and we're talking, when it comes to major projects, billion-dollar projects in the country, they're apples, oranges, and bananas in terms of delivery. I can see what I can intuit off the list. Sort of there's 2 levels to the list. It's a bit technical, but the first level seems to be easy wins, things that are already in process, things that are going to hit financial close. That's called a final investment decision. The other ones, they're longer term. They're going to need a little bit more financial analysis. And if you look at the list, or for your viewers who look at the list, you can notice that in the first half, they actually talk about the monetary value of some of those projects. In the second half, they haven't done that yet. So it says to me that they're looking at primarily how to monetize those assets and explain to Canadians what it will mean for the country of Canada. So at the end of the day, I get why the government is choosing the strategy that it is, but I think you're right. The fruit is on the second part of the list, for sure, the main fruit for Canada, yeah.
And interestingly, you did a report not long ago for the Public Policy Forum, Build Big Things. It's kind of a 10-point checklist. I was looking at it, and a lot of them have been realized by this government since then, which must make you happy. A couple of them towards the end are longer term. They have to do with commitment, follow through, things that are softer. Do you have confidence in those things? Because that is, as we're talking here, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of really transforming our economy.
Thanks for noticing the work and what we've done. The way I kind of view it is I go through the list every time there's a new announcement and say, oh yeah, tick, tick, and they keep working down the 10-point, what we call the 10-point action plan. And I'm really happy to see the announcement of an Indigenous Advisory Committee, for example. Right. But as you rightly said, the fruit is in actually putting together that office effectively and making sure it has the right expertise, the discipline, and the acumen to keep at this for a couple of years. This is not a short-term play for anybody. This is, many years in the making, and it needs the right people, especially the financial expertise, to say whether a project is going to move forward properly or not. And I'm hoping to see more of that in the fruition. But it was good to see that they are going to include the financing vehicles of the federal government in that office. So that's a step in the right direction. But again, a lot more to uncover and unpack as they go through this. Really good to see Indigenous involvement. That's a key one. The final thing I would say here, Amanda, is enabling infrastructure. So if you were to ask me, and I thought maybe you might, what's not on the list? I kind of wonder a little bit about, we've talked about this before, the West Coast, the Pacific Gateway. Like if we do not have more port capacity out west, a lot of this may not end up materializing in terms of global markets. And we really do need that. So I'm looking for that next, yeah.
All right, well, stay tuned. Jay, so good to have you for this.
Yeah, likewise. Nice to see you again, Amanda.
Jay Kozla is Executive Director of Economic and Energy Policy at the Public Policy Forum. Coming up, finding new markets for Canada's exports may be the most important challenge the country faces. We'll explore after this. Welcome back. The Prime Minister has lofty goals for diversifying Canada's trade, so are exporters up to it? Here's a look by the numbers. If sentiment matters, the news isn't good. Exporters are feeling gloomier than at just about any other time on record. Export Development Canada's Trade Confidence Index is at 65.7, down 3.3 points this year. The pessimism follows the data. 40% of exporters report a decline in U.S. orders. 36% of them see further declines in the next 6 months. That has 2/3 of them looking at a decline in international sales. 40% who think that weakness will spill over into their domestic market, too. To counteract the drop in exports, Canadian firms are either taking a hit to their profit, trying to up their Canadian sales, diversifying into new export markets, or changing their sourcing. But a large number of exporting firms, or 71%, do plan to expand into new markets in the next 2 years, with an emphasis on Europe, Asia, and Latin America and the Caribbean. It seems as if Canadian businesses have lofty ambitions to find new markets for their products. So what help do they need to get that done? Mina Iyer is Manager of Economic Services at Export Development Canada. Thanks for being with us, Mina.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda.
So I did want to start with the confidence data because, of course, a business that isn't feeling confident often doesn't want to spend and invest. And yet those same exporters are saying they do have plans to do it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, of course. When you're faced with the challenges and the kinds of challenges that businesses are in this day and age, they naturally seek to employ a range of strategies to counteract these challenges. So one of the ways in which businesses are trying to make sense or try and regain control of their businesses and their futures is by diversifying into new markets, as well as investing in other markets to reduce the impact of tariffs on their businesses.
EDC, of course, is in the business of helping Canadian companies do this. In terms of the supports that they need, are they already in place? Is this just a matter of you saying, yeah, here, we have it waiting for you? Or are there new programs that you need to put together?
Yeah, another great question. So I'll start by pointing out that EDC was set up in a time of crisis and was set up to fill in the gaps and to work with our partners to provide the services during the time of crisis. This is one of those times. So I'll say to start with, diversifying takes a lot of time. It requires what we call the 3 Rs, the approach to the 3 Rs. So there is a relationship aspect. So we have our own business connections program, but where we work to connect companies across to other vendors and other markets. We also work with our partners to do this. You require resources, which means unlocking cash flows and providing working capital, where we work with private sector partners as well as other crown corporations to provide guarantees and other solutions. And of course, you need to understand the rules of the market. So if you want to enter a particular market, chances are we have free trade agreements there. There are certain rules that you need to abide by. And again, we work with our partners, such as the Trade Commissioner Service, as well as other players in the ecosystem to provide these services. So I'd say we are pretty well set up to operate in this environment, and it's part of our raison d'etre.
And of course, a big shift is the U.S. market will always be the easiest market for Canada. It's right there. We share similar language, similar rules of law. But suddenly businesses are saying, actually, this might be a longer-term proposition. So in terms of the sheer volume that you expect to see, do you think that people are sinking in that this is actually a real thing? It's going to be a long-term shift, not just a short-term, let's wait Donald Trump out kind of mentality?
Yeah, so what I can tell you from our TCI data, one of the data points that you quoted was that about more than a third of the respondents indicate that they expect declines in their U.S. orders, and more than an overwhelming majority of our sample does say that they expect their overall export sales to decline. So at least over the span of this year, it sounds like the prospects are low. However, what I would say is also from a longer-term perspective, like you mentioned, the U.S. is our nearest partner. It is easier, cheaper for businesses to get their foothold there. We also know from our other surveys that businesses that tend to do well in the U.S. Take the capital from there and employ it in other markets to expand to other markets. So the U.S. is part of the story, and it's hard to deny the benefits there.
So interesting. Exporting begets more exporting. Meena, so good to have you with us. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Meena Iyer is Manager of Economic Services at Export Development Canada. As Canada seeks to increase its international trade, the northern shipping routes will be more important, and investments in the Port of Churchill could be among the priorities of this federal government. Chris Avery is CEO of Arctic Gateway Group. Thanks for being with us, Chris.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
So the Port of Churchill's been around a long time, but what is the opportunity that it now holds for both it as a port, but for Canada and our exports?
Well, we've been talking about the Port of Churchill and the opportunity for Canada for quite some time, but it's really accelerated, and that conversation has really accelerated ever since President Trump took office and imposed tariffs on Canadian goods and really disturbed the geopolitical situation between Canada and the U.S., and also talks of the 51st state. So what we've always offered through the Port of Churchill and with the Arctic Gateway Group is direct access to global international market for the vast resources we have in Western Canada, in Alberta and Saskatchewan and in Manitoba, direct access to the vast markets in Europe, Africa, Middle East, South America, and even Latin America. And so this diversity of trade is important for our national agenda. And it really, provides opportunities and optionalities beyond the U.S. It also supports us in becoming a global energy superpower.
Right.
And on top of that, with the talk of the 51st state and so on, really helps us with the infrastructure we have, Arctic Gateway has in the north, with the port, the railway, a 9,200-foot paved runway airport, and the town infrastructure itself. It gives us a great set of infrastructure to assert our sovereignty in the north.
And so the Prime Minister mentioned the Port of Churchill. So there's some assumptions being made about upcoming kind of major projects and money that might flow. Assuming that there is a federal infrastructure spend to come on some of the infrastructure you just listed, a railway, a port, and probably some other things, is there support, all the support you need locally? In other words, I'm thinking of local communities and stakeholders, First Nations. Is everything in place to make that infrastructure happen?
Yeah, so there's, as recently as last week, a group of senators, Canadian senators, were up in Churchill as an example. And, not only did they meet with us, Arctic Gateway Group, which is a ownership, which is owned by 29 First Nations and 12 local northern Manitoba communities. Not only did they meet with us, but they also met with the town and the communities and community members, Indigenous leaders, Indigenous members. And, there was great discussion about, the opportunities for Churchill and what it means for the communities. And it was a frank and honest discussion, but I would say there was universal support for moving in this direction and what we can do to support the national agenda. Of course, there always needs to be more communications and more updates, and we will always endeavor to do that.
Only a few seconds, but how soon before this could be a major operating port for Canada?
Well, we are already up and operational. The railway is in better condition than it's been probably in over 30 years. The port is very much operational. We've shipped critical minerals through the port to export to European markets the past 2 years. We supply the central Nunavut region, the Kavalik region already, and have vessels coming in. In fact, there's a vessel in today to pick up supplies to go up to the Kavalik region. We expect agriculture products to go through the port this year. And then we also, as Churchill, as a global tourism destination, we've had a couple of cruise ships come in already this season.
So good to have you with us, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amanda.
Chris Avery is CEO of Arctic Gateway Group. Coming up, what does a second-class worker look like in Canada? That's still ahead. But first, Rupert Murdoch's empire will be divided up between his heirs, but the conservative jewels in the crown will stay in the control of his eldest son, Lachlan. The family drama, which inspired the hit show Succession, is finally over, with Rupert's more moderate children taking cash and giving up control over properties like Fox News and the Wall Street Journal, settling to fight, but apparently at the cost of the family. Feels a little bit like life imitating art. We're back after this. The temporary foreign worker program has come under fire for its potential to abuse workers and also because it could shut out existing residents of Canada. Businesses say they need the program, but there is also a growing call to scrap it. Armine Yalnizyan is the Atkinson Fellow on the future of workers. Armine, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So somewhere in the middle of this muddle is the truth. Do we need a program of temporary foreign workers that will work for less money than Canadians will?
Well, let's just put this in, let's take stock of the size of this program, which is about 1/10 of all of the intake of temporary newcomers we bring in to both study and to work. So it's a very small part of who we're bringing in, and it's received all of the focus because of this extraordinary statement that we should scrap it. It comes in two flavors, high skill and low skill. And so a lot of the focus has been on the low skill jobs, the entry level jobs, because youth unemployment has spiked in the summer. But youth unemployment has spiked for other reasons, not because of the temporary foreign workers. Plus, a lot of Canadians don't want to do the jobs that are the so-called low skill, which are the low paid jobs, which is things like processing your chicken and slaughtering your beef and, descaling and degutting fish and doing all the agricultural work, stuff that Canadians don't want to do and have been told for decades they should get a better education so they can get a better job. So if this is the trade-off, we're going to get rid of the temporary foreign workers so you can do those jobs. I'm not sure it's a trade-off that Canadians will buy into without seeing significant increases in wages and therefore in costs as consumers.
And of course, the important point you made there is this has been going on a long time. So even if you could make the case that we should just pay Canadians enough to want to do those jobs, it would be a pretty big shift for industries that have adapted to this way of doing it. Having said that, are we protecting those workers? Because some of the legitimate complaints are a worker comes in and they're tied to one employer, and that could leave itself open to abuse by that employer.
100%, Amanda. The program is rife with exploitation. This is the temporary foreign worker program, which ties a temporary foreign worker to one employer, often saddling that employee with living costs that are taken out of their wages, and the living conditions are terrible, often saddling them with the cost of coming to the country, even though that's illegal. It's badly monitored. It's badly enforced when it is obvious that exploitation has taken place. Right. And and it is not a good program for a whole bunch of reasons. So there is some legitimacy to say we should maybe not scrap it, but certainly reform it considerably, given that businesses are saying we can't get along without some of these workers, because even if we pay $30 an hour, Canadians aren't going to want to do some of these jobs.
Only 30 seconds. You've made this important point that it's a small part of a bigger picture. Is the rest of it working well? Is the high-skilled component of our visas working well?
By and large, the rest of it isn't as problematic, but there's, anybody that doesn't have permanent residency status is open to exploitation because they want to stay. And so they will do whatever the employer says. So that's the issue that we need to be looking at. If they're good enough to work here, they're good enough to stay here. That has been the time-tested truth of jobs that Canadians haven't wanted to do for over 100 years.
Armine, so good to have you. Always appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Armine Yalnizyan is an Atkinson Fellow on the future of workers. Time for the takeaway and the price of putting your head in the sand. In BC, the lives of a flock of ostriches has become something of a celebrity cause, but also an extremely serious court challenge. At its heart, the case is about weighing the individual against the collective. And while the feathery flock may have won some hearts, the question remains, is cuteness alone enough of an argument to undermine long-standing animal management practice? The 400-bird flock at Universal Ostrich Farms has been on death row since last December after an outbreak of avian flu that would ultimately kill 69 birds. Standard practice is to cull the herd immediately to protect other birds, including poultry farms, but also to prevent the avian flu from mutating and potentially spreading to humans. Cull may be an overly antiseptic word, so let's call it what it is. The birds are put to death. For context, that's something that happens to millions of birds every year in Canada as part of the same rigorous standards around disease. It may seem like a cruel way to manage the health of animals in our care, but as long as we raise animals for our own benefit, we have a responsibility to do it in a way that limits risk to others. But the farmers in BC ignored the order from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and their birds lived on. That's despite the fact that some of the humans who came into contact with that flock did indeed wind up with the avian flu in their blood. And despite the fact that bird-to-human transmission was confirmed in BC earlier this year. 2 levels of court later, with both a federal and the Court of Appeal upholding the cull, and the farm is standing firm in its refusal to follow the order. Cue the protesters and throw in some high-profile commentary from the likes of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and you get a riveting drama. But meanwhile, the avian flu continues to have the ability to mutate in those ostriches with massive potential harm to other farmers, never mind some humans. For now, the farm is under a strict quarantine to try to limit the damage and has won a temporary stay against the cull. Again, my takeaway, we all like to feel special, but when the rules stop applying to everyone, they wind up applying to no one. There's a word for that, and it's called anarchy. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.